None of us want to stand up at the wrong time or clap at the end of the show when it's not the end of the show. None of us want to look foolish. In the When I was in college, actually, we had to attend a concert series as part of our required curriculum, and most of the students probably didn't want to be there. We were there for a Beethoven symphony, and my friends in our row were appalled when half the audience applauded after the first movement. In the film adaptation of Brideshead Revisited, there's a wonderful scene about two characters, and everyone's on board the Queen Elizabeth during a terrible row of a storm, and the ship is pitching. Most passengers are hiding away in their cabins, but two characters venture out to go to the lounge car to have a drink, and they have to navigate this hatch door that is violently swinging open and shut, and they have to time it just right to cross the threshold and enter the car before the hatch door slams shut. As they cross through, someone in the car ahead of or in the room ahead of them compliments them on their deft and navigation of a dangerous situation. We all want to go through life with as few missteps as possible. This week, I heard from my friend Marcy, who attends St. Christendom's, that Wesley Smedley, the pastor there, has left as senior pastor there, and the congregation has noticed that people are starting to return. Apparently, a third of the congregation loved Wesley, and a third could tolerate him, but a third really weren't into him. And that third is now re-emerging. I was kind of surprised by that because I actually liked Wesley, and he was a welcome transition after Mr. Weber, the previous pastor, who I think was universally disliked. We had a steady stream of people attending Fourth Pres who were escaping Mr. Weber at St. Chris, but apparently now there's another transition, and the tides have turned somewhat. So I was intrigued by the idea that Wesley appealed to a third, and a third that was indifferent, and a third not so much. And I guess it just points up the idea that you can please a third of the people some of the time, but you can't please two-thirds of the people all of the time. Welcome to Sunday Coffee Hour. I'm Stanley Smith. At Sunday Coffee Hour, we talk about everything and nothing. And someone actually pointed out in our call this week that a lot of the topics we talk about, it's almost like a prayer. We're lifting up our joys and our concerns. And I wouldn't have thought of that. So that was interesting. In so many situations, it's a flow of ideas, and these ideas are always coming, and we can make of it what we will. And I sometimes and oftentimes are very startled and edified by some people's insights and even my own. But the idea that conversation can be a prayer if we're listening and in tune to it. Some of the topics we discussed this week were having questions in person, the topic of moving to Spain, and that furniture designed by young people doesn't seem to be very comfortable. We also talked about the fact that Argentina won in overtime. The readings this week were from Isaiah, and that sometimes we need to ask for a sign. And from Romans, we were created to be a messenger. The gospel was about Joseph. At National Cathedral, this sermon was about oftentimes in life, we're given the choice between two bad options. And it's hard to have faith in those moments, but we've all experienced this, having two bad options. And somehow we manage to have faith and navigate a bad situation. At St. James, the sermon was about making a resolution for a new year to act on some of the beliefs and values that we hold close to our hearts in the new year. Both at National and at St. James, they had an opening prayer reflection that included the image of building a mansion. We need to be a mansion so that the Lord can inhabit us. I was intrigued at Washington National Cathedral because the closing hymn then was People Look East, which references that very idea of people look east, the time is near for the crowning of the year, and prepare your home as you're able trimming the hearth, and setting the table. There was a amusing organ miscue at St. James when the organ sounded before the tower bells started to chime, and half the congregation believed that was the call to worship and stood up, and it turned into kind of an awkwardly amusing episode where the congregation was standing for about 5 minutes before the service actually started. When Wes started at St. Christendom's about maybe 8 years ago, I think, I had a couple encounters to talk with Wes, and I gave him a whole series of recorded sermons by John Buchanan. I had high hopes for Wes after a really a dismal period at St. Chris with Mr. Weber. I thought, wow, this is really a great time for renewal, and I wished Wes all the best. And as I mentioned, we had a steady flow of people escaping St. Christendom's over the years, and most notably, my friend Jane Kennedy, who always was a member of St. Chris, but attended Fourth Pres in her later years because she really couldn't stomach St. Chris. And I know we had many people at Fourth Pres who had their children in the children's program at St. Chris because even though they had a clunker pastor, their children's program was of note. It was renowned as being a superior program. And we had people dropping their kids off in the Sunday program at St. Chris and then coming over to hear John Buchanan. When Shannon started at Fourth Pres, I guess she encountered this similar dynamic. And in an early meeting with the deacons, she when asked about some of the kerfuffle about people's thoughts about the transition, she said, "Well, those people have other issues," and she's right. We all have plenty of issues. Growing up in my hometown in Rockford, Illinois, I attended as a child Trinity Lutheran Church, and I wasn't that savvy about what was going on in adult affairs, but I often got an inkling of it. And one inkling I got in transition at Trinity was that, yeah, people were not always happy with the new pastor. And one person who was a leader in our church was instrumental in getting rid of the new pastor. This person was so dedicated. She had her living room painted in the same Wedgwood blue color that the Georgian sanctuary of our church was painted. But she found it necessary to campaign actively to make sure that the new pastor was not there very long. And I remember thinking as a kid, who would campaign to get rid of somebody? At St. James, I noticed in the program later on that St. James and the Episcopal Church are in communion with the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America. And I was struck by that and heartened by that a church can be in communion with another church. But later I thought, well, wow, think of all the churches that they're not in community with or in communion with. And that is a puzzle for these people in church life these people who live in glass houses. I mean, apparently they have other issues also. I think as a congregant, we often look to pastors and clergy, and we're looking at them and scrutinizing and looking to them for hope and direction and faith. But I guess it doesn't always appear to us that it's not always obvious to us that the clergy and staff are also, well, they're looking back at us. And probably, truth be known, as lovable as we like to think we are, we're probably not the congregation they really want. None of us want to make a misstep or stand up at the wrong time or clap before the show is over. But it's just part of life. And we also realize we can't make all of the people happy all of the time. And we probably shouldn't try, but if you're a savvy traveler in this lifetime, you can do a pretty good job of it before the door closes and hits you in the ass. If you would like to join us at Sunday Coffee Hour is every Sunday at 12 noon Central Time. I will be happy to send you an invitation. I will include my email in the description of this video, and I look forward to seeing you very, very soon.